Welcome back to the class on international business communication. Today we will synergize whatever we have been talking about in the previous classes. We have talked about oral communication, we've talked about verbal communication, we've talked about non-verbal communication, we have talked about the implications of the different concepts related to these different kinds of communication, the different channels of communication. Today, and we've talked about intercultural communication, which is a very important aspect of communication, which is the most important thing in international business, and that is intercultural communication. And today we will start bringing these different ideas, different concepts together. Now, I was having a discussion, a very interesting discussion with one of my students the other day, and we talked about how difficult it is to teach and learn the social sciences, and that is what makes the teaching and learning of this subject so difficult. It is not linear, it is not unidirectional, it is not, there is some sequence to it, but everything is interrelated. So I could be talking about communication styles in the very beginning, and I could be telling you about verbal and non-verbal communication later on, and different people do this differently. There is no right or wrong way of going about it, and that is what makes the teaching and learning of this subject very difficult. Now, the easy part is that we are doing this 24 hours. We are doing this all the time, 24/7. We are communicating verbally and non-verbally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all the time, and that is where the applications of these things come in. So I want you, before we even get into this synergy, I would like you to start thinking about or start recognizing the examples from your daily life. Start recognizing whatever we have talked about through the examples of behaviors in your daily life. And before we get into communication style, there is one more thing that I would like to bring to your attention or bring to your notice. And again, as one of my very senior colleagues once pointed out, bringing something to somebody's notice or attention the phrase has a negative connotation, and for want of a better phrase, I would like to share with you this very important debate that has been going on as far as the styles of communication are concerned. Now, and the biggest problem here is to figure out whether behavior is affecting communication or whether communication is a part of behavior. Now, historically, communication styles have been studied differently. They have been studied as part of personality. But when we look at it very deeply, we realize that it is communication, it is the manner in which we communicate that determines the kind of personality people think we have. And that feeds into what we think about ourselves, as we had talked about in our discussions on identity, and that in turn influences what we send out into our environments and how we send it out. So we'll come to that later on. But considering this whole chaos, this mess of communication, considering this mess of communication styles, let us now get into communication styles. Okay, communication style. What is communication style? Communication style is an individual's tendency to communicate via unique patterns of combinations of code, content, and communication rules. What does this mean? When we talk about combinations of code, what kind of code are we talking about? By code, we mean the language that we use. Content is what we put in it, the words that we pick from that language, and communication rules are contextual. So our inherent tendency to communicate via unique patterns of combinations of code, which is the language, the words that we take from that language, and the rules we follow while speaking in that language to somebody who is familiar with that language and to somebody who may not be that familiar with that language. And that could be true for the people listening to this lecture. The manner in which I am trying to explain communication styles to people, again, the whole purpose of this series of lectures through the National Program on Technology Enhanced Learning is to reach out to the masses to people who are far away and who cannot come to places like IIT, and the whole purpose of these lectures is to reach them and give them as good quality of education as possible so that they don't feel left out. And of course, we are doing a service. We have come from the same community. We are trying to give back to the same community. So, I am trying to explain communication styles to people out there, to you. And the manner in which I am doing it is very, very specific to this situation. I am using a combination of code, which is English language. English is not my mother tongue. I learnt English just as you did in school. But I have been speaking it regularly for a long time, so I feel I'm very comfortable with the grasp I have on the language. I feel confident about the language. I think I know enough about the language to talk in it, to write in it, to think in it. But that code is the language, and many of you, I am assuming, speak other languages. Many of you do not have English as your mother tongue. Many of you have maybe Hindi, Pahari, Punjabi, Gujarati, Marathi, whatever your region is, you have that as your regional language. So, this is a different code. The content, the words I am using. If I was talking to somebody, to an expert in communication, if I was talking to my professor, I would not have taken more than 30 seconds to come up with a precise interpretation of this definition. Why? Because the words that my professor expects me to use while explaining this will be very different from the words you expect me to use. When I say code, I don't have to explain to my professor what code is. When I say content in a message, I don't have to explain that to my professor. Why? Because this person has taught me most of, or probably everything I know about communication, okay? And communication rules. When we say communication rules, how I talk to you, I am talking to you from a place of authority. And of course, this is unidirectional communication. Even if this were a real class, I would expect my students to first listen to me, and only when I asked them, only when I stopped or finished explaining what I was explaining, I would expect my students to come up to me, interrupt me, ask me questions only after they had raised their hands and only after I had pointed one person out and said, okay, you tell me what you want to know. So, that is the combination of code, content and communication rules. I can't do that with you. And that is why the manner in which the patterns that I follow to integrate the code, the content and the rules are different from the patterns I would follow when I was talking to a person in authority, and that would be different from what I would follow when I was in a classroom where I had 100 students sitting there listening to me. Some of them wouldn't be paying attention, some of them would have many other things on their mind, some of them could be distracted, some of them would actually be, hopefully most of them would be paying attention to me. Okay. Now, the other thing here is, from an intercultural communication point of view, communication style is the tonal coloring, the tone, the extra linguistic features that we, or the para language that we attach to the language or to the words or to the code, okay? The meta message that contextualizes how listeners are expected to accept and interpret verbal messages. We talked about Berlow's model in the very first lecture, I think. We talked about the importance of context. We talked about how the creation or encoding of a message differs from the decoding or reception of a message. We also talked about the wrapping of a message within the context of the channel that is used. So, this is the meta message, which means the philosophical idea attached to the message, my perception of what the message is and what it is supposed to do, the perception of the listener about what the message is and what it's supposed to do, and that contextualizes how the listener or the recipient of my message is supposed to accept and interpret the message. I'll give you an example. I am hoping that you, the listeners of this course, the people who are receiving this course through YouTube or through some other channel, whatever that may be in your case, I am hoping that you are listening to what I am saying. I am hoping that you will take these keywords that I point out to you and you will Google them and you will look them up and you will maybe consult the web course that I hopefully will be able to offer, and you will get back to me if you have any questions. You will contact your teachers and hopefully maybe 1 in 1,000 people will get interested enough to contact me and ask me if I can train them a little bit more on communication. So, that is my expectation. Now, that is a context that I am attaching to the message, and that is my tone is defining how I am drafting the message, how many times I am repeating the same concepts. So, that is the tonal coloring, and Martin and Nakayama, who are the proponents in intercultural communication, who are the stalwarts in intercultural communication, are the ones who have come up with this explanation. It combines both language and non-verbal communication, as we have already established, that is communication style. Now, the background. The background for communication styles is that how did it all begin? It started historically, it was restricted to royalty. It became part of training to people involved in international trade. It has been a part of training for people involved in international trade for thousands of years. And initially, when the international trade started, the people involved in trading across the border were royalty. So, royalty were, or sons of pharaohs, is where the initial documentation is from. I am sure it was happening in other cultures also, but the sons and daughters, the daughters of pharaohs were married into other countries, into other cultures sometimes. Again, a historian can point me out if I am wrong, but that is what I have found initially through JSTOR, Journal Storage, which is a database. Now, it has been studied, it has also been studied as part of personality for almost a century. The MBTI is the Myers-Briggs type inventory that is based on the Jungian styles. It is not Jungian, it is not Jungian, it is not Hungian, it is Jungian styles. Carl Jung, a famous psychologist, came up with these styles of personalities, came up with these categories of people. He said that people communicate in a manner to be perceived as collaborators or controllers. I am ordering you. I have the authority to make you do something, and that is the controller. Collaborator, I am going to work with you and get something done, that is the collaborator. The analyzer, I will first look into whatever is happening, I will first cut it up piece by piece, I will go through it step by step, and then I will figure out what is going on. And socializers, let's be friends, let's talk, and then we will hopefully implicitly in and through our communication we will start understanding what our lives are all about. So, that is one side of communication styles. We will see a lot more. I wish I could categorize all the communication styles, give you one formula, but there is none. Different people have studied communication differently. They have come up with different styles depending on how they analyze whatever they study. So, none of these definitions or categories that I am just going to give you is the only one, is the most important one. Every one of these categories that I am going to share with you stands on its own merits and is open to critique, criticism, debate, whatever you may like to call it. But as your teacher, it is my responsibility to share with you the diversity of opinions that exists on this. So, you can see, we are unique people, and that is why we all come up with our own understanding of how to categorize people and how to categorize their behaviors. Okay. According to an article in the Handbook of Interpersonal Communication that I have shared with you in the past classes, we have some communicative dispositions. Okay. And Daly, in his paper that was published in this book in 2011, says that we have 4 levels of communicative dispositions. The first one is argumentativeness and verbal aggressiveness. This is our inherent tendency to communicate in a particular manner. The first one here is argumentativeness, which involves an individual's willingness to attack another's arguments while defending his or her own position, and that is argumentativeness, and it is perceived to be constructive and an indication of the speaker's resistance to persuasive attempts. So, argumentativeness is good as long as we debate on somebody else's arguments and defend our own position, and that is an inherent disposition, that is an inherent tendency, internal urge to do that. Some of us have that urge, you can see that in your own daily lives. The other side of it is verbal aggressiveness, which is attacking the self concept of others, attempting to cause psychological pain. So, this is a more negative kind of behavior where we are not trying to defend our point, we are trying to attack the self concept of other people around us, and we are intentionally trying to cause psychological pain to the person we are interacting with. Verbal aggressiveness is perceived to be indicative of dislike for others, dissatisfaction, low communication skills, more physical aggression, defensiveness, and an unwillingness to accept mistakes. I am who I am, I will stick to my guns, I will not give you a reason for sticking to my point, I don't care what you think, I don't want to collaborate, I am going to fight and I am going to have my own way. Okay? It is the opposite of verbal benevolence. Verbal benevolence is a person's tendency to agree to everything that is being said. Yes ma'am, yes sir. Now this is the opposite. I am never going to agree with you. I will never accept whatever you are saying at face value. I will attack it because it is my way or the highway. And again, there are benefits to such things also. If you are like that, you may win in some situations where you really need to win. Okay. But of course, it does not come across as very comfortable. The second type of communicative apprehension, communicative disposition is communication apprehension. This is something I want you to think about. This is our inherent tendency to not communicate. I am scared of communication. What does the word apprehension mean? Apprehension means I am scared to communicate. I do not want to communicate because there is some fear in me that is stopping me from communicating with you. It has alternatively been labeled as reticence, social communicative anxiety. I am scared, I am anxious, I am worried about communicating with people. Shyness, which is considered a virtue in many cultures, and social anxiety. It indicates less likelihood to talk in social settings, engagement in less eye contact. And again, all these things are culture specific. In some cultures, the willingness or ability or a person's nature or disposition or a person's behavior in which the person does not make enough eye contact with people, the person is supposed to be very, very respectful. In other cultures, a person not making eye contact is considered to be very flaky or evasive. But all these things are not, none of this is absolute, none of this is the only thing. You are welcome to disagree, you are welcome to find other opinions that and refute these opinions and debate. I welcome all of you to debate, and if you give me an opinion that is different and if there is logic behind it, I will very gratefully accept whatever you are telling me. This is what I have read, I could be wrong. And this is definitely not an exhaustive list. Lesser tendency to disclose information is again associated with communication apprehension. I am scared to share my information with people. And that is why ultimately I am scared to make contact with people, so I will not feel like sharing whatever I know with people. It is also been labeled as introversion versus extraversion. So introverts don't normally like to share things with people. Lesser conversational sensitivity. Now, if I am not open to sharing information about myself, I am also in a way preventing myself from receiving the signals coming to me from my environment. I am not opening up, I am not sensitive to whatever is happening in my environment, and that somehow comes with the territory. Since I have blocked people out, I have put them out of my shell, I have this big wall around myself, I'm not sending signals out, but I also have a tendency to not let signals come in. And that is what this phrase lesser conversational sensitivity means. Lesser likelihood to select occupations that require communication. I am not comfortable talking to people. I have this big wall around myself. Okay. So, I am not comfortable engaging in occupations or taking up occupations, doing work that requires me to talk to people. And believe it or not, such people, if a person has a choice between selecting engineering or medicine, a person who has got admission in both the programs after class 12, there are a few of those people, and there are people who do both the courses in foreign countries. But here it's good to be selected for a medical college and an engineering college at the same time. People usually go in for one or the other. A person who is apprehensive about communication would probably prefer to take up engineering as compared to medicine. Why? Because in medicine, the person will have to constantly deal with patients, will have to constantly talk to people. If a person has a choice between research, the research side, and the teaching side of any profession, many of us who do PhDs, we have a choice. Many of us get into research, many of us go into teaching. Those of us who are scared of talking to people usually retreat into the research side. We focus more on research. And again, my colleagues are welcome to disagree, but that has been my observation. And of course, these things have been proven through research also. So, we are likely to select occupations that require, lesser likely to select occupations that require communication. And you, the people who are listening to this course, you really need to pay attention to this. You have to recognize what your inherent tendency is, what you feel like doing and what you don't feel like doing. Many of you could be at the beginning of your careers, many of you could still be at a stage where you are trying to decide what to take up as your career. So, you have to recognize whether you are shy about meeting people, whether you are uncomfortable talking to people. In that case, it may not be a very wise idea to take up occupations that require you to deal with people, unless you are really ready to overcome that tendency. And many of us are able to do that. We are scared, we get into a situation, we throw ourselves into that situation and we learn. I am one such example. Anyway, less willingness to seek career advancement. These people who are apprehensive about communicating with people become more complacent about their own about changes in their lives, in their professional lives, and they are scared to talk to new people. They are scared, or not scared, but they are apprehensive, they are anxious, they have a higher level of anxiety about going into a new situation and readjusting to a new situation and reconnecting with new people. So, what they do is they tend to stay longer in the organizations that they are in. They tend to not go into situations where the success is assured. So, their movement is somehow restricted by their inherent tendency to feel scared of communicating with people. Conflict is another communicative disposition. We will talk about it more when we discuss conflict and negotiations in communication. Okay. The last point here is communicative and social competence and skill. We have talked about communicative competence. Social competence is a larger, is a superset of which communicative competence is a part. Communicative skill depends largely on conversational sensitivity. We were just talking about the sensitivity to communicate with people, the sensitivity, conversational sensitivity in terms of communication apprehension. Now, let us discuss what this is. It is the ability, or conversational sensitivity taps an individual's ability to assess and respond to various communication challenges. So, it is your ability to deal with different kinds of communication challenges. Now, what affects conversational sensitivity? The first factor here is detecting meaning. Conversational memory is another one. Conversational, you have to be able to find meaning, you have to be able to recognize that something is going on in your environment. Conversational memory, what do I tie these things in with in my past? Conversational alternatives, do I have, what have I said in the past that I can repeat in this current situation? Copying and pasting from our past experiences, that is conversational memory. Conversational alternatives, what if whatever I know about such situations in the past does not apply to this situation? What are the alternatives I have? Can I get into or can I draw from some other situation that was different from this, but still come up with some type of conversation, some content context mix that I can apply to this situation? Conversational imagination, how able am I to think out of the box and pull out different alternatives to deal with the situation, different ways of receiving information coming from my environment? Can I classify this information, or should I just accept it as a different bit of information that is coming to me? Conversational enjoyment, you've recognized things, you have tagged them, you have put them into different files. Now is the time to sit and actually start feeling and detecting and understanding your own comfort levels in that conversation. Once that happens, then we start interpreting, and after that we decide whether we would like to get into a similar situation or not, and that is the perception of affinity, okay, whether we like it or not. Communication accommodation theory, another very important concept for this class. This theory was proposed by Professor H. Gillies in University of California, Santa Barbara in 1971 in his attempt to find out why people switched the manners in which they spoke to different people and in different situations. He wanted to find out why and how do we adapt. And he says the theory specifies how two people from alternate cultures interact in ways that reflect their personal goals as well as cultural identity. So, how do we interact? How are our interpersonal differences highlighted? How do we accept the different backgrounds that we are coming from? The concepts here are convergence and divergence. Again, two ways in which we adapt our communication are: the first one is convergence, adapting one's speech style to match that of others with whom the communicator wants to identify. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. When in Bengal, understand Bengali. You have to do it. When in Himachal, learn to follow the different accents. People will speak to you in Hindi. When you go to districts like Kangra and all, they will speak in a mixture of Hindi, Dogri and Punjabi, and we have to retune our ears to accept these different signals coming from our environments. I will give you an interesting example. I lived and worked in Ahmedabad many years ago for about 3 years, and again, the Gujaratis listening to this will probably be able to identify with this. In Gujarat, the words for left and right are Dabi and Jamni. So, and my home is in Himachal, my family lives in Himachal. So, what would happen would be, when I was in Ahmedabad, if I was using an auto rickshaw, I would use these terms. Again, I didn't learn Gujarati, but somehow we say our accent starts matching that of the people, we use the same terms. So, even if the auto wala understood, the auto rickshaw driver understood right and left, I would use the local terms to direct him where I wanted to go, and I would say dabi baju chalo, jamni baju chalo, which means left or go right. And once it so happened that I went from Ahmedabad to Delhi, and I used the same terms. Why? Because I was so used to using these things, and the auto rickshaw driver said, what did you just say? And I realized that unknowingly I had adapted to their way of speaking. Again, this is one small example, may not be the right fit. We start adopting the accents of people, we start using some local terms, we start understanding the connotative meanings of these terms. That is convergence. Here again, mutual and non-mutual accommodation. Depending on where we are in the communication situation, mutual accommodation is I will adapt a little bit to your style, you adapt a little bit to my style. So, when you are working closely together, you will start understanding what the other person is saying. You will start using terms, you will start talking in manners that the other person talks in. When on the other hand, when it is a top to bottom, or when it is an asymmetrical interaction, which means one person is here and the other person is here, I think we talked about it in the class on communication rules. We have non-mutual accommodation, which means that the person who is up there in this symmetry is under no gun or has no compulsion to adapt this to adopt the style of the person here. The person has to adapt to the style of this person here. The person has to learn to understand the style, but the person does not necessarily need to, this person up here does not need to adopt the style, take on the style of the person here. On the other hand, the person here feels compelled to start accepting, start understanding, start using the style of the person above them in hierarchy so that they can fit in. So, that is non-mutual accommodation, one-sided relationship or one-sided attempt to accommodate to this person, and then they come at the same level. The whole point about communication accommodation is that both people try and align their comfort zones in their interaction in such a manner that they start understanding each other, and in that we have convergence, and within convergence we have mutual and non-mutual convergence or accommodation. Divergence, on the other hand, is speaking in a way that emphasizes one's difference. I go to a different place, I refuse to let people in Bengal pronounce my name in a Bengali way. My surname Malik is pronounced as Malik here, and when I hear that I feel uncomfortable, and I have to keep reminding them it's Punjabi Malik, it is not Bengali Malik, please don't call me Malik, it is Malik. And then they'll still say, oh Madam Malik, and I'm like, no, not a double L. So, but again, so I'm highlighting my difference, I'm saying I am different. They'll pronounce the word Aradhana differently. I'm sorry, I wish I could do it, I can't do it right now. When I went to the US, they wanted to know whether I had a nickname or whether my name could be pronounced differently. Nothing wrong with that, but I insisted that if I can learn to pronounce their names, they can also learn to pronounce my name. So, eventually my name became, the closest they came to was Aradhana, which is simpler to pronounce, but again I highlighted the differences. So, I said, okay, I am here, I am accepting you, I am totally out of this thing, I don't have to change my ways to fit in. Please accept me the way I am and I will accept you the way I am. That is divergence. We will fit in, we will somehow graze we will somehow brush against each other, we will find a common point of contact, we will get in touch, we will connect, but at the same time my individuality, my differences and your differences will be respected, and they will be up here, and we will build on these differences and we will find common ground. That is divergence. We will find a comfort zone despite these differences. That is divergence. Or we will minimize the differences so that we can align our comfort zones with each other. That is convergence. Okay, some dimensions of communication styles. Goody-Kunst and Ting Toomey in 1998, in Martin and Nakayama 2000. Intercultural communication. Some dimensions of communication styles are direct and indirect. The extent to which the speakers reveal their intentions through explicit verbal communication and emphasizes low context communication. Okay, the direct communication is followed in which culture? I have talked to you about low and high context cultures. You decide. Direct is followed in low context cultures, or direct communication style is preferred by people in low context cultures. Indirect style of communication is preferred by people in high context cultures for a variety of reasons that have been discussed in the class on intercultural communication and will be discussed again in the classes on conflict and negotiation. Elaborate, exact and succinct refers to the quantity of talk that people value. The elaborate style uses a rich, expressive language. Lots of ornamental words, lots of additional words, just adding on to the flavor of the conversation. That is elaborate. Succinct values understatement, simple assertions and silence. That is the exact opposite. So, in low context cultures, the elaborate style may be preferred. Now, you will say this is completely different from direct and indirect. Again, no culture is exclusively high context or low context. They are a mixture of these things. But in low context cultures, we are encouraged to share whatever we are feeling with the environment so that stability can be maintained in the environment. In a high context culture, we are supposed to work through our emotions and share whatever the bare minimum possible. I am supposed to understand what is going on in your mind without you having to tell me about it, and that's fine. When you are coming from such a culture, you realize you learn to read these signals over a period of time. You learn to recognize patterns in a person's behavior. We learn to figure out where we stand in relation to anyone else within the environment, and we start understanding these subtle signals, and that is the succinct style of communication. The exact style emphasizes cooperative communication and sincerity as a basis for interaction. Again, here this is somehow the middle ground between elaborate and succinct, neither too much nor too little. So, wherever we need to talk, we will talk. Wherever we don't need to say too much, we will stay quiet. Personal and contextual styles, different ways of addressing different people in different contexts. Again, I will give you an interesting example. Now, in English, the pronoun you remains you. Okay, so it's you in English, it is you in Hindi. It is you. I mean, if you are higher than me in hierarchy, I still address you as you. If you're lower than me in hierarchy, I still address you as you. If you're my peer, I still address you as you. In Hindi, tu, which is somebody down there, tum, peer, and aap, somebody senior. And again, tu is considered to be very rude or disrespectful or extremely informal. The only person I am supposed to address as tu is maybe my brother or some of the younger cousins, and that's all. Aap and tum are the most preferred styles. Again, in other Hindi languages or Sanskrit based languages, we have similar distinctions, and the manner in which, if I am addressing somebody as tu, the manner, the tone I will use to talk to the person, the kinds of words I will choose, the non-verbal signals will be very, very different from the manner I will address somebody in hierarchy. If I say aap, everything about it changes. If I am talking to my parents, the inherent understanding is they are my parents, they are elder to me, they have a lot more experience and they have authority. They can tell me to keep quiet whenever they want. and I have to keep quiet. And so, you know, considering all those things, that is the context I'm talking from, and they are my parents and I love them and I don't want them to get hurt by what I say. I don't want them to be uncomfortable about whatever I say. So what I say, how I say it, how these rules, as we discussed in the first slide, map out in such a situation will completely change with that situation. When I say tum, colleague, maybe some colleagues, not all of them, some friends, some older cousins, and or some, you know, some people who I'm not very comfortable with, but the rules will be changed. And when I say tu, then I go up and the other person, when I say tu, it is immediately understood. Somebody here will say aap or will call me tu. There is no tum. So these are the extremes, and the same thing will happen. So it's hard for somebody not coming from such a culture to understand what I'm saying, but for the Indian students who hopefully will find this video useful, they will probably be able to understand it better. These things are very difficult. This is what makes teaching this course so difficult. There are a lot of things that we consider as implicit, that we take for granted, become very, very difficult for us to explain. Okay, instrumental or affective styles. Okay, that is another dimension. Instrumental is sender and goal oriented. Affective is receiver and process oriented. We've talked about intercultural communication. I leave it for you to decide which culture would prefer the instrumental style, or in which culture would the instrumental style be very more prevalent, and in which type of culture would the affective style be more prevalent. Please take the help of your teachers if you need to. Okay. Now I would like to take the liberty of sharing this very interesting paper with you. Okay, this paper is called The Protean Communicator, and it was published for the first time in September 1994 in a journal called Management Review. The author of this paper is David P. Ewing, and it is one of my favorite papers in any kind of discourse, any kind of teaching of communication. And Ewing talks about these styles in a very different manner. He compares them to characters from Greek mythology. Anyway, I can go on and on, but I can see that we are running out of time. So what I'll do is I will quickly go through these different categories mentioned in this paper. The first one, according to Ewing, is flowery or oratorical. This is the style that we use when we are trying to elevate the position of the person we are talking about, or when we are trying to describe something in a very positive light. And this is used for festive occasions or inspiration. This is the time, this is the kind of style in which we add lots and lots of positive inflated adjectives. Plain and straightforward style is when we sort of straight away get to the point. It's direct, short sentences. This is the kind of style that is preferred in the international business environment. Remember this. I'm going to talk more about this when we talk about written communication, but you get straight to the point, cut out the additional frills, cut out the additional conversation. Indirect or opaque style. I'm sorry, my apologies right in the beginning to lawyers, but the whole profession of law, I believe, rests on persuading people, rests on research, extensive research to find out what has been done, how different rules have been interpreted, what can be done to ensure justice to the people involved. And so again, it is not about not taking responsibility, but this kind of style can also be used to avoid taking responsibility. You sort of pin the blame on somebody else. We say, instead of the report should have, I should have submitted the report, or X should have submitted the report by so and so date, I say the report should have been submitted by yesterday. I leave a way out. You decide who should have submitted the report and what will happen to them. But I am just bringing to your notice that a report that should have been submitted yesterday has not been submitted till now. I will not tell you the name of the person who was supposed to submit it. I am leaving a way out. Okay. Personalizing or humanizing style is used to stir up readers and arouse action. This is where we start connecting with readers on a very personal level. We say, I feel your pain, I empathize, I know what you're talking about, I understand, I can feel the same thing, I was in a similar situation. And I will leave it open for you to discuss amongst yourselves which professions rest, the success of which profession rests on appropriate and optimal use of the personalizing and humanizing style of communication. Excuse me. Stilted or redundant style. This is the kind of style we use when we try to numb the senses of the reader, of the person we are talking to. And again, I'll take the liberty of sharing something, an internal secret of the academic profession. We professors do this to numb your senses. We throw big words at you that you need to look up in dictionaries, maybe on Google, and we tell you, look, I know more than you because I know the meaning of this word and you don't. So, you we try and numb your senses, we try and scare you into believing that we are smarter than you. We are, of course we are. If you're students, we hope that we are at least as smart as you, if not smarter. But this is what we do when we want to enforce authority. This is something that you might end up doing when you are in a position where somebody is trying to unnecessarily harass you. You need to do your homework before you start using this style. But then, if you really want to get out of a situation, you start throwing big words at people, you start telling them, and the right big words, you use the wrong big words and you suddenly lose their respect. So, you can scare people, you can numb their senses, you can end a conversation by using these big words to defend yourself. Winding and voluminous style is used for brainstorming and clarifying vague thoughts, and you say, well, it is winding, how can it clarify vague thoughts? The way it can do it is that when you start going about round and round and round about something, slowly you start getting to the point, you start chipping away the unnecessary ideas, the unnecessary concepts, the unnecessary confusions associated with any concept. And this is what students do when they write their final exam papers, especially when they don't know the answer and they are trying to convince us that they know the answer. So, what do? You start at a point, then you start making connections, and because the time is short, you start beating about the bush. And Indians who know what a jalebi is will realize why I call it the jalebi style. My very favorite exercise on this is to ask the students to figure out a connection between religion and quantum physics. I don't know how many of you are pundits in both of them. You could know more about one, less of the other. I don't know anything about any of these two things. So, again, you could have a discussion, and at a later stage when we talk about writing, I will give you some exercises that you can do in class that will help you understand these differences. We will come back to these differences when we talk about written communication. So, please don't lose the slide. Okay. Communication styles as manifestations of personality. We've talked about different things here. Now, let's get into what, again, I would like to introduce this also to you. I don't have the time to explain all of this to you, but I would like you to look this up on your own. The Hexaco is, or perfect inventories are, they've been used by this by De Vries in a paper that was submitted to the annual International Communication Association conference in 2005. And in this paper, these two styles and the comparisons between these two styles have been described. It's a lexical study of communication adjectives, the dimensionality of communication styles. So, in this, De Vries compares the Hexaco style and the perfect style. When you look at this list, Hexaco is starts with the H, go right to the bottom. Honesty or humility. Hexaco is an already established style. So, that is comparable to the truth that is expressed in a person's, through a person's personality or through a person's communication. The E stands for extraversion. E stands for emotionality, and that is draws parallels with emotional. The X stands for extraversion, which draws parallels with being eloquent. A stands for agreeableness, which draws parallels with friendliness. C stands for hexaco. C is not covered here, that stands for civility, and C stands for conscientiousness, which draws parallels with precision, and O stands for openness to experience, which draws parallels with the complex style of personality. The incivility is not covered in the hexaco style, and that draws parallels with rudeness. Now, again, maybe at some other point later on in this class we will discuss these styles. I have just been told by the attendants, by the technicians here, that I am running out of time. So, I will quickly move on to the different to the implications of these styles for the business environment. There are many different styles of communication. They have been categorized differently. We will talk about verbal styles at some point. We will talk about writing styles at some point also. One thing that I must, let's move on to the factors affecting communication styles and implications for business environments, and I think we can stop there. So, I can definitely give you some more references about these styles, but I can only cover these many. I could take a whole class on communication styles and still not be able to get through whatever is out there. Okay. Some factors affecting communication style. What affects the style that we adopt? The first one here is context. We've talked about this ad nauseum. We've talked about cognitive styles as well. How we think, how we perceive our environments, what we see in our environments affects the style that we adopt, affects the manner in which we accommodate to our surroundings, which we adapt to our surroundings. Humor, again, different ways of humor, self-directed and other directed humor can have different implications for the people in our environments, and that can in turn impact the manner in which we communicate with people. Technology can also affect our communication style. Again, one more keyword for you to look up. Marshall McLuhan talks about the medium being the message. What we interpret for about a message depends on the medium in which we receive the message. So, please look this up. Emoticons, we use emoticons to bridge the gap between written and oral communication, and I am sure people who are listening to this are very familiar with that. The level of formality in technology impacts the or perceived formality about the technological communication can impact the style we use in communication. Evolving definitions of traditionally accepted communication styles are dependent on the use of technology or the transmission of our messages, traditional messages, through the evolving technology, and that in turn impacts the way we modify our styles and how we say things to whom and how are these rules followed. Okay. Some implications of these styles for the business environment. The first one here is style and direction of organizational communication depends upon the style we use as communicators. The style that my boss uses will affect how I deal with my boss or how I respond to my boss, and that will in turn determine whether my organization is horizontal or vertical. So, all those things change. Entitlement. Entitlement deals with connotative meanings of words and the manner in which we use these words that afford a perceived entitlement to knowledge of the words associated, connected with the words we use. Very complicated. In simple terms, all I am trying to say is that since I am giving you all of these complicated definitions, you will assume, whether I know it or not, you will assume that I am the guru, the pandit on communication. I would like to be perceived that way. On the other hand, if I make a small mistake, you will say she is just making it all up. So when I start using a word long enough, when I start dealing with something long enough, when I start talking about something long enough, I gain a sense of perceived entitlement from the environment that is exposed to my interaction about me having some authority on the discussion of such communication or such concepts. Okay, planner client communication, which is the communication we have with our, if I am planning something, my style of communication will depend on what the client wants and what the client's personality is all about, and these styles interact, and then sort of interpersonal relationships are formed. We will discuss all these things in the lectures to come. Knowledge of styles affects the improvement of intra and inter team communication, and that in turn leads to lesser conflict. That is the whole goal of discussing all this in a class on international business communication, and this whole thing rests on context and whatever we discussed in the previous slide. We'll talk about deception another time. I'll give you some questions to think about. The first one is it possible to map the entire gamut of communication styles that people adopt in different situations? If yes, how can it be done? If no, why not? Think about it. List the different kinds of situations managers find themselves in where adoption of specific communication styles becomes essential for the completion of specific tasks. For example, personalizing or humanizing style in human resources, etc. And the last thing I'd like you to think about is, in the business environment, why is it essential to ensure coherence between one's intent, choice of words, and communication style? Why am I telling you all this about communication style? So these are the things I would like you to think about, and we will meet in the next class. Thank you.